You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello, welcome to Nurture Your Zest. This is my live stream. My name is Ashleigh King, and we have been live streaming from home since lockdown started in the UK around March. So it's really great to be able to talk to you in your homes, but also to be able to talk to people all over the world. Tonight's guest is actually from Florida in the States, so I'm really excited to speak to someone in another continent. It's our second American that we're talking to, so we're really excited about that. Actually, the first one was South African, but staying in America, but hey, that doesn't matter. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm really looking forward to sharing Taroy Jackson with you. He is a podcast host of the Average Joe podcast, and it's all about his thoughts, the thoughts of an average Joe, on dating, life, just things that pop into his head, and he's interviewed some great people too. And so without waiting too long, I'd love to just bring him to the stream and introduce him to you. So without waiting any longer, hi Taroy, how are you?
How you doing?
So thank you so much for joining me tonight, Taroy. How are you this evening?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Yeah, it's been a pretty chill day for me. I'm still a student, so I've been working on some assignments.
Oh, okay.
But it's okay. I'm nearly finishing in September, so looking forward to that. And you graduated how recently?
Um, when did I graduate? I want to say like 2015, I think. It's been
Great.
a while, so I don't really remember.
Yeah, it's funny because you study broadcast journalism, and that's something I did years ago. The first time I did a degree, I didn't actually finish that course, but I studied journalism in Leeds in the UK. So I was
Okay.
really excited when I saw what you'd studied because that was my favorite module, broadcast.
Okay.
And so
Yeah,
I know
broadcast
you.
journalism was fun.
Yeah. And I know you're a podcaster, so I'm sure that actually doing something like broadcast journalism probably helped you with a lot of skills that you needed to be a podcaster, especially the interview stuff.
Yes. Tremendously. You have no idea.
And actually, just on that note, so when you listen to your podcast, The Average Thoughts of an Average Joe, the intro, can we just talk about the intro for a second? Because that is so cool. Did you make that yourself or did you get someone to do
No,
it?
so what happened was I used to work with my one friend. He's like a brother to me now. His name was Xavier, and he did the original intro, which is at the end of every episode. And so when I started to rebrand my podcast, he wanted to redo the intro. So he was like, "Yo, bro, I got this," and I was like, "Yo, it's inspired. Let's roll with it." And that's been my new intro since since May of this year.
It's a really awesome intro. Like the first thing I thought when I listened to it, I was just like, wow, this guy's so professional. It's amazing. It's really good. Okay, so, and you love sports. So do you actually do sports broadcasting then? Do you do some stuff live or anything like that?
No. So when I was in school, I did, but then when I got out of school, I just couldn't find anything. So I just worked two regular jobs. But sports is always my passion. So I have an actual podcast, and then a sports podcast. But I'm just not as consistent with the sports podcast as I am with my regular podcast.
And out of interest, because they're very different audiences, do you find that you have a bigger audience with your Thoughts of an Average Joe podcast?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so when I started doing the sports podcast, I forgot like how quickly I had to remind myself like half of my audience is female listeners. And so when you're going to do a sports podcast, most females don't listen to sports. So it's like you have to adjust.
I think it's an interesting point actually, because when you read your bio about your show, it talks about, you focus on the feminine perspective too, and you also have
Hmm.
guests who come on and talk about all that kind of stuff. And I was really thrilled to see that when, listening to quite a few of your episodes. Um, just the whole outlook and ethos that you have. It was really cool. I love that. And so it's great as well that you've got so many females listening as well. And I think you're right, being that we're both podcast hosts and have multiple podcasts, when you have different audiences, it's really interesting to see who listens and why. So I have a podcast called MBA with Ash. That's all about my
Okay.
MBA, and it's all about the people on my course who are from all over the world and all sorts of different countries. And it's interesting for people who want to do an MBA, right? Or who want to maybe study
Hmm.
or want to know more about business, but actually not everyone's going to be interested in that. So it's nice to have different places you can put your passions, I think.
Yes, exactly. So the NBA is probably more like if I'm assuming right, an informative podcast and people that want to get their NBA. You know what I'm saying? It's something that okay, she's doing it. Let me see how the experience is. So by the time I get to do it, I have an idea of what to expect.
Exactly, that's it. And that's basically the reason I started that one, is because I was like, when I was looking to do an MBA, I was looking around and I was like, there's no one like me doing an MBA. Everyone's super
Hmm.
corporate and super business-like, and I'm a creative and I just want some like awesome learning. And so I looked everywhere. I looked for books, I looked for podcasts, and there was just nothing. So that's why I started that, to kind of reach those people like me who were maybe looking for some sort of support, or just whether it could work for you. But yeah, I've actually learned so much through the course. So I'm so thrilled I did that. But yeah, I wanted to ask, so your sports podcast, what sports do you love? Do you focus on a particular sport, or is it just across all different kinds? Or
Um, so it's me and my best friend. We're in two different states, so it's a little bit more challenging. Because we both like talk on the phone, speaking to the mic. He'll send me the file, and then I'll edit it. But we normally talk. My favorite sport to play is basketball, but my favorite sport to watch is football. So we'll talk football, basketball are the two main sports, and then we'll also get into baseball and hockey from time to time.
I love it. I love all those sports, and I love to watch them. And actually, I've been to the States twice, and to
Okay.
Canada, so North America overall. And I really, really one day hope to go and actually see a game, because I think the energy and the atmosphere must be incredible.
Yes. Yes, it is. Oof.
Yeah, the only time I've ever experienced something like that was probably about 15 years ago. I'd only lived in England a short time, but I was able to go to a Manchester United game
Okay.
in Old Trafford, and we call obviously it was what you would say soccer rather than your football's different to ours, isn't it?
Hmm.
But yeah, that
Hmm.
was amazing. Just the crowd was so cool. So yeah, sports are really fun, and they bring people together, don't they, from all walks of life and just all
Yes.
backgrounds, and it's just that energy in the stadium. Actually,
Yes, they
speaking of
bring
sport,
everybody together.
yeah, they do. But speaking of sport, that's a really interesting point, actually, because you're in the States, you're in Florida right now, so you've got a very, I guess, unique perspective of things that are going on. We see
Hmm.
certain things in the news in the UK, but I'm always curious what we're hearing and what the media is telling us and what it's really like on the ground. And recently with social media, we're fortunate that we're seeing different perspectives of things that are happening. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've spotted things that have been in the news as one perspective, and then when I've actually seen footage on Facebook,
Hmm.
like real footage, or people who were there saying, well, that's not what actually happened, this is what
Hmm.
happened. It's
Hmm.
almost like creating more opportunity for people to speak up. And the
Yes.
reason that I was linking that to sport and kind of the news and what's going on right now is it's really interesting that this element of people bowing and taking a knee in the sports arenas and stuff like that. Have you got any perspectives on that and what's going on there?
So a lot of people down here see it as taking a knee. It's a disrespect to the flag. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not a disrespect to the flag. It's just more so we're kneeling because African Americans aren't necessarily valued in the country as, you know, Caucasians are, and we're seen in a different light, and we just want the same respect. We want the same equality. Now, people take it and try to make it seem like you're disrespecting the flag, but it has nothing to do with the flag to begin with. It has everything to do with what we feel as a people. And then even Colin Kaepernick went to an Army veteran and he said when they like when a fallen soldier has died, they kneel down in honor of respect. So that's why he did that, because before he was just sitting. So that's how I see it. Other people see it differently.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because there are so many different perspectives, and in any community, whether it's the white or Caucasian communities, or whether it's the Black community or any different communities, within those communities there are also voices and opinions that differ and clash. So that's, yeah, I find it interesting how much things can change. Um, and I also love this idea of solidarity as more voices are being amplified through social media and other avenues. There's a lot of conversations going on. I've seen a lot of stuff where people I would never have imagined in the whole world would talk about some stuff because they were maybe really racist or a particular way. I've actually seen people defending others in a way that I was just completely shocked. So I think there's definitely an awakening of some kind at the moment. But yeah, it's been a very interesting time. And what's it been like in Florida?
Like in regards to the coronavirus, it's just, I don't want to say it's pandemonium out here, but I don't think our like governor took it as serious as he should have. So now we're kind of feeling the repercussions in regards to the second wave. Where I personally live at, it's not as bad as the media says it is. Like, you know, everybody's pretty much covered up, or at least they try to be covered up, wear a mask, you know, try to protect yourselves. But I haven't really been impacted by it because I still go to both my jobs every day. Like, it wasn't, I still got to go to the jobs. They didn't give me a chance to work from home. So it's just like, it's regular for me. It's
I
just
think
now it's just social distancing and we're just more cautious than as we was before.
absolutely, but I think that's a really important point. So, depending on what work you do, and it could be any industry, it could be, I'm just trying to think, like cleaning in a hospital,
Hmm.
or whether you going in and working for the police, or whoever you're working with, there are many people who can't work from home. So even just the idea of working from home for many people is such a privilege, right?
Hmm.
It's not something that everyone is in that position. And I think sometimes the media, or there's a lot of people kind of whinging about working from home, but actually that's a very privileged position to be in, to not have to
Hmm.
get public transport with lots of people and be around lots of people at this time. And as you said, not, again, it's back to the opinions. Not everybody sees the virus right now as a time to
Hmm.
kind of stay indoors or protect themselves, and then you have other people who are more hyper anxious and don't want to leave the house. So
Hmm.
it's really interesting how different personalities, different people
Yes.
respond to this huge global thing.
I wanted to at first. I was upset that my job didn't let us work from home, but now it's just like, okay, it's just the same thing. It's the same thing that I've been doing, so nothing really changed. Because if I was to work from home and then had to go back to work, it will be a different story. Because I'd be like, why I got to go back to work? Like when we've been just working from home this whole time, why can't we continue to work from home? So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting about working from home as well, how many people just assume that staff are lazy, or they're just going to waste
Hmm.
time, and maybe, from most of the people I've seen working from home or heard of, they're working longer hours than they or ever did before, because they have this feeling like they need to keep working harder and harder because no one's watching them, or no one's really
Hmm.
seeing what they're doing. So can you tell us, when you kind of like your everyday work? So I know you have your own podcast, and it's one of your
Hmm.
passions for two. And you also teach people the podcast, and we're going to talk
Hmm.
about that in a little bit because I do as well. But when you're not doing podcasting, what's your usual job? What do you do?
Okay, so I have two jobs. My day job, I work at a call center. We basically help older people with stair lifts, get stair lifts. My department is more so of once the warranty expires to get them a service agreement, so that way they can go ahead and continue to be covered. That's all over the world. I believe there's some in the UK too that we have, because I think that's where the actual corporate office is, because that's where the owner is. He's from like the UK. Now the Orlando is the corporate office in the States, and then overnight I work at Joanne Fabrics. Like I help fill the online orders. So like Monday through Friday I'm like really busy, and then Saturdays I do my whole podcasting.
Wow, you work super hard. That sounds like a lot of work because, yeah, I mean, a podcast on itself is a lot of work, right? I mean, there's the editing, the promotion, the finding the guests, the arranging the guests, all of that. But actually, to be running two jobs as well, that's incredible. And also, with everything going on in the world, to actually have the kind of courage to leave your house and go to work to these two jobs, I think that's really amazing. And yeah, I'm inspired by how hard you've been working because it's yeah, it can be pandemonium outside there. Um, I'm curious because obviously you're in a completely different country to me, but was there a time in the beginning when people were kind of panic buying and stuff that people were really freaking
Oh
out?
my
So,
gosh, yo. So okay,
yeah.
so I still, till this day, cannot get any wipes. Like not any like cleaning wipes. I can't find any to this day. Like still. So when the pandemic first started, toilet paper was gone, wipes was gone, like paper towels was gone. I don't know why toilet paper was gone. That was beyond me. Now you can find toilet paper, but I still can't find any wipes. And this is when it is starting, like March, and we're in like about to be in July, and I still can't find any wipes. I'm just like, yo, like when is this going to end? But yeah, it was that, and then hand sanitizer was gone for the longest. You couldn't find any hand sanitizer. So for like the first, I want to say from like May to like, I mean, from March to like maybe like middle of May, you couldn't really find anything. It was just because the thing was I work. So when they all stocked up, I was at work, and by the time I get off work, gone. They said the shelves were wiped in like 2 minutes. It was ridiculous.
I think that was a huge issue everywhere. So all of these people were panic buying, but then you've got people who are working, so they can't buy anything. And this was happening in the
Yes.
UK, and people were really upset about this actually because we had doctors and nurses and firemen and policemen who were exhausted, working crazy hours, and they couldn't buy food because people were just panic buying. Um, yeah, I found it hard a few times going into the shops in the beginning, and like usually I'm from South Africa originally, and I've always found it, even now in the UK, the amount of food on offer, and it's the same in the States. You go to like a store, like a superstore, to get groceries, and it's just like, wow, because we don't have that in South Africa. We just don't have those many options, and that kind of thing. So going into the supermarket in the UK where there's always a good supply chain, and just seeing that there was no toilet roll, there was no cleaning products at all, no sanitizer, as you say, no milk, no cheese, no bread, no eggs. It was like, oh my gosh, it was really overwhelming at the time, actually. I'm glad that that's kind of calmed down, as you were saying. There's some things back on shelves now.
Yes.
But it's also encouraged me, I think, during this time to try and buy from more independent shops. Like I guess in the States you might say your mom and pop shops. Like
Yes.
these kind of smaller independent ones, because they are, they really need the trade right now.
Yes. I've been doing that a lot. Like I've been trying to buy more from like black owned businesses, mom and pop shops, smaller businesses, because the big corporations are going to be fine. Like even when Trump, our president, gave out the stimulus packages, it was a lot of small owned businesses that did not get that money, and it went to big corporations. So I try to make sure that I at least once a week try to give a black owned business or smaller owned business like my money, so that way they can at least try to stay afloat, because that's really, my opinion, more so important to the economy than the big businesses. The big businesses are always going to be here, but if we can't support the small businesses, that's really going to hurt the economy over here.
Exactly. And the other thing is, in the UK, we're fortunate that there is free healthcare, the NHS, and hopefully that stays free going forward. But there are many countries all over the world where there is no healthcare, there is no benefits or support for someone if they're unemployed or anything like that. I know there is some health in the States, but I know it's not, say, as much as the UK or some of the Scandinavian countries. But yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting time globally to watch what's going on with this pandemic, but also the economy and thinking about, people and are they safe? And I can't remember the exact phrasing of this quote, but the president of New Zealand, I think she said something about, well, actually, even if our economy gets back on track, but we've still got kids being, starving, and there's so much poverty. Well, really, we're not successful at all. So don't worry about the economy. Worry about the people.
And I respect that, because I feel like more so down here, everything's geared more so to getting the economy back more so than the health of the people in the States. And I think it's starting to take a toll, because Florida, Texas, like opened up early, and now it's like all these we're seeing, like just yesterday I believe it was like 9,000 cases in one day. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, how are your friends and family and you feeling like on the ground, just, about the virus, or just about policies and things going on? Are you feeling safe? Or are you feeling scared?
Between everything that's going on, between the the murders over here, and then the coronavirus and everything like that. The coronavirus, like I feel like I do as much as I can. I do my part to make sure I'm staying 6 feet away, make sure I have my mask on, make sure I sanitize my equipment. The coronavirus isn't what scares me. It's just everything else that's going on around here that scares me. Between the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, all of that is what scares me, because it's like not only do I have to worry about a virus, now I have to worry about the cops. And then if I'm wearing a mask, they may think I'm trying to rob somebody, and I'm really not. I'm trying to protect myself. And then just like that, I'm another statistic. So I think that more so is what bothers me. But I mean, for the most part, my friends and my family, we all wear masks. I always make sure that we try to do our best to keep each other safe.
Yeah, it's really important to try your best to keep you safe. But I so agree with what you're saying there. It's not just a virus, it's the other things, the other triggers, the other things that can hurt you that are scary. And this fear of being another, sorry, I can't say it either.
Yeah, yeah.
The fear of being another statistic, that must be so frightening. I can't, I can only hear what you're saying and sympathize, but I will never understand. On that note, I'm curious, how has it been for you growing up in the States? How has your experience of race relations be? Have you been stopped by the cops? Have your family been stopped by the cops? Do you see this happening to your friends in the Black community, that they are overbearing and they are stopped for no reason and that sort of thing?
So I got stopped by cops a few times, but it was mainly because my tag was expired. But I haven't had any like real police brutality happen to me. But it's just we're real cautious, because we know at any time it could be us. So police could have a bad day and just be like, you know what, that's it, and then we're just doing what we do, and then it's a wrap. So I'm definitely more cautious, especially after the whole Ahmaud Arbery situation. I used to like take walks around my development at like 12 a.m. at night just to clear my head. I don't do that no more. I don't even take walks, because if he could get killed in broad daylight, I could get killed in broad daylight, and I don't even want to go down that route. I do remember one day, it was probably maybe like a year ago. I was probably maybe like 9 o'clock at night. I like stopped at my house, had my car on. I was just, I didn't feel like getting out, so I was listening to music. So then a cop pulled up behind me, and a cop was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" They was like, "Do you live here?" And I was like, "Yeah." It was like, "Can I see your license?" I'm like, "For what?" Like, I live here. I was like, "If you don't believe me, you can knock on the door and they could tell you that I live here." I was like, "I'm just minding my business. Like, what more do you want from me? I'm not harming nobody. I'm in my car. I'm not even playing loud music. Like, why are you bothering me?"
Yeah, that's crazy. I can't believe that's happened to you. And just as you say, just sitting innocently, in your car, listening to music in your own neighborhood, yeah, that's crazy. And not being able to walk in your neighborhood,
Exactly.
late at night to get some fresh air.
It was one morning I was coming home from work, and it was 5 a.m. and I was driving home in my development, almost to my house, and I saw a Caucasian running at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I was like, that is a luxury that I no longer have. Just to walk, I wish I can just run around in my neighborhood at 5 in the morning without getting stopped as to why I'm here, or do you live in this neighborhood? Like, I know my temper, so I don't even want to put myself in that situation because it won't end well for me or the person.
But you're so right. I mean, we have been talking on the show, particularly in June, we've been talking more about Black Lives Matters. We've
Uh-huh.
been trying to amplify, Black creatives and leaders, and just hearing about new perspectives. And it's been really interesting because a common theme that keeps coming up through this month and through these chats is actually the privilege. We know, or
Uh-huh.
we are learning, a lot of people, some are learning about privilege for the first time, but
Uh-huh.
how much privilege we take for granted. Something,
Yes.
as you say, running at 5 a.m., going for a walk in the middle of the night. Actually, I've seen quite a lot of stuff where maybe it's a mixed race couple, and actually the guy has said, I have to make sure that I run ahead of my girlfriend, because if I run behind her, people think I'm trying to harass her or attack her
Uh-huh.
or something like this. And it's just, it's crazy that there is so many views like this. But I think as well, there's a lot in the media that doesn't help. So if you look at TV, what we see on the TV, a lot of the films that kind of create these stigmas or thoughts,
Uh-huh.
or and out of interest, because you've been in broadcast journalism, that's what you studied. Have you got any views on the film industry, or entertainment generally, and how uh, possibly exclusive it is, and actually trying to get involved in that, or the stuff that's on TV?
So I do know for the most part, like being in journalism, I learned really early that the media likes to control the narrative. They like to manipulate what you see on TV. So like there was a protest out here about I want to say a couple weeks ago, and only one person tried to get violent, and they tried to make it seem like it was a violent protest. But we had over 18, I would say at least maybe over like 3,000 people there, and only one person was trying to be violent. But then you try to make the whole protest about it being violent when that's not necessarily the case. Like you keep talking, you keep seeing, like there's been instances to where even down here, the Orlando Police Department, like they took a picture where them kneeling with the protesters, and then soon as the picture was over, they tried to tear gas them. And it's just like, but the media doesn't show you that side of it. The media only wants to spin it as, okay, well, we see here these violent protesters, but it's really not that way. And then it's also been instances to where you have other groups that try to manipulate the Black Lives Matter movement. Like we down here just the other day, we had painted a street, and then it was a group of people that defaced it, talking about go away, abolish, and they put the hashtag Black Lives Matter to make it seem like we did it. But us as African Americans know that we didn't do it. Like there was also another instance to where somebody had like spray painted Black Lives Matter on a graveyard. I know for a fact that we didn't do it because most African Americans aren't even going to a graveyard. Like that's what I'm saying. That's not what we do. So I just feel like it's a lot of people trying to not change the narrative, but trying to deface the movement for what it is. And like I always try to tell people, it's not like we're not saying that all lives don't matter. We're just saying that all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter, because that's part of the movement. And people get that confused with the two.
Yeah. And one of the things that maybe is so triggering to people is that they've just never considered
Uh-huh.
the social injustices and structural racism that happens, whatever country you're in. But definitely in the US, in the UK. Recently I discovered about the slave history in the UK, how
Uh-huh.
involved the UK was in the cotton industry, and how many slaves came through UK ports before going to the States. So
Uh-huh.
actually, that was really quite shocking, and I found it really fascinating as well. Yeah, I think it's it's really interesting to see how people react, because it's, why do we react in these ways? There's so many issues as well that are kind of multi-layered. So when you see these fights outbreaking on Facebook
Mhm.
or in person, I mean, are you seeing that a lot on Facebook? Are you finding in your community you having people asking for or just fighting, or having to delete people, or having to defend your community, or all of those types of things?
I've seen it on Facebook. I haven't necessarily seen it in my community, but I've seen a lot on Facebook to where Caucasians would say the N word to African Americans, and then they would just get beat up. And I mean, like, if you're bold enough to say it, you're bold enough to get the repercussions of whatever that may be. Like, I just feel like us as African Americans, we're fed up. Um, it's even hard nowadays because, like, with the whole incident with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, it's like, yo, we can't even go to the store. I can't even sleep without worrying about, am I going to be able to wake up the next day? Are they going to accidentally kill me by accident and just be fine? And they're just fine with it. Like, she would sleep in her house and she was murdered. It's just, it's draining. It definitely is draining, especially like these killings that are back to back to back. So I try to decompress when I can, so that way I'm not just so emotionally overwhelmed.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how overwhelming that must be. And just hearing you saying there, about going to sleep and not even knowing if you're going to wake up, or, that kind of thing. Do you feel, are you having nightmares? Are you finding that, any of these sorts of things? Because it's almost like post-traumatic stress, watching
Hmm.
all of this unfold and then actually living with the effects on your body.
I don't want to say post traumatic stress, but I remember when I did the Ahmaud, I did an episode of Ahmaud Arbery. That took a toll on me, and then like right after that, literally like the next week, George Floyd died. And so everybody asked me, was I going to do an episode? And I was like, I literally just did an episode on this the week before. And then that's when it really started to take a toll on me, because we like Florida was pretty much had just opened up, reopened back up pretty much when right before the whole George Floyd incident. So the George Floyd thing happened. We were protesting. It was just, that got to me, because it was just at that point, it was like, yo, it's just, I've seen somebody who was closer to my age get murdered, somebody who's probably closer to my uncle's age gets murdered, and it's just like, yo, when does it stop?
Yeah, absolutely. And also the protesting, I mean, that will have an additional toll as well, just putting yourself out there, going
Hmm.
and marching, talking to people. But also, would you say, have you ever had any fear of protesting in case it might impact your job or your work
Um,
or anything like that?
so I did not protest, only because my girlfriend lives in New York, and I was going up there to see her the week after, so I did not protest while I was in Florida, just because of that reason. I didn't want to get into a incident to where like I get a rubber bullet or whatever, and then I can't go up there to see her. So for that reason, I did not protest. But the next couple protests that are down here, I will go to.
Yeah. I wonder if you can comment, Taroy, on your feelings as a Black African American growing up in the States and thinking of, say, Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King, and everything he stood for, and all of that work, and the work of, Malcolm X, and many people who've tried to fight for civil rights and race equality. Obviously, we see what the police have been doing. We see other things that have been happening in the States. But do you think there have been any changes, and any of that work has actually progressed?
Um, I would say slightly. It has slightly progressed. I feel like there are more Caucasians now who are more aware of. Now there are a vast majority of them that are still ignorant, but there are a number of them that have come to see the struggle that we have dealt with. The only thing I would say that I think the difference between the Martin Luther King generation and our generation is, yeah, they protested, but they also took money out of their pockets. So they protested, and they were like, okay, instead of taking a bus, we're going to drive to work, or we're going to walk to work. Our generation, we protest, but that's it. Like, there's nothing after that. Like, we don't like take money out of their pockets. And I feel like if we're going to get actual change, that has to be the main focus. That's one of the reasons why one of my friends, Akile Hughes, has started an organization called United We Stand. And it basically is just all about what do we do after the protest? Because if we do not capitalize on this right here, we will never get this type of momentum again.
I think I just listened to her podcast with you the other day. Is that the lady you had on your podcast?
The
Or is that a
other,
different organization? You were
uh,
speaking to somebody about a social enterprise they were setting up.
yeah, that would be her. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, it's great to hear that, and she's doing that important work. I think it's important as well. You've already mentioned this tonight about putting your money behind, supporting
Hmm.
Black communities, supporting the mom and pop shops, supporting the smaller, independent stores. That's all very important stuff. And something that I was curious about is in terms of actually, maybe at the time, say the 1960s. Almost was 1967, 1968, wasn't it? Those kind of riots. Um, do you think maybe people were more forthcoming with cash to support the movement at the time? Because I'm just curious about what's going on now with COVID. Many people have been hit financially, so they're
Hmm.
maybe not giving or supporting the movement as much. I mean, there's obviously various foundations and various charities that have been set up around Black Lives Matter and various projects that are kind of off that. But do you think that maybe COVID has in any way impacted their just general America or the world, their ability to donate to these efforts?
I will say a little bit, but I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's more so. The problem with us is not more so donating; it's just more so of get making change. So if we're going to make change, not only do we have to donate, but we need to hit these people's pockets who we want to hit. So like when Starbucks had said, like they weren't going to have anybody wear Black Lives Matter mask. And then the black community was like, okay, that's it. We're done with Starbucks. And then a couple days later, they saw how important the black dollar was and changed their mind. It's like the thing that I think us as African Americans we have to get across is the black vote and the black dollar really helps the economy. So if we really want to get change, we have to take the black dollar away from these companies to really get change. Because in my opinion, that's the only way you will get people of wealth to understand you is when you hit their pockets financially. If you don't hit their pockets financially, yeah, they may do this, they may do that to throw you a bone, but you're not going to get real change.
That's a really interesting perspective, yeah, about using your financing and your power in that way. Are there any other things that you think you can do, or even more that maybe the white folk in America can do to support? So in their workplaces, in their community, I think one of the things that's triggered people so much in the white community is the sense of like shock at actually what people are
Hmm.
going through on a daily basis and not knowing what to do with that shock and just like they feeling sorry, right? But the sorriness isn't helping anyone, like the
Hmm.
guilt and the shame of slavery and all of that stuff. It doesn't help now. It doesn't help. It's good to say like actually I'm sorry for what happened, how can I help? But
Hmm.
it's really interesting that often I think some of this uh, aggression, don't all lives matter and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
That's more about I think guilt and like projecting their uncomfortable feelings onto anger and other things.
Hmm.
But, I mean, is there anything that you think would help or
Um,
different going forward?
so what I normally try to tell my white friends are be a part of the change, be a part of the solution. So if you know things aren't right, speak up on it. Educate other people. Also, if you see that I'm getting pulled over and you're driving, stop. Stop and help me. Because I honestly feel like if there were more um Caucasians that actually helped and stopped, I feel like we wouldn't there wouldn't be as many killings because it's like, okay, he's there, he's safe. Let me make sure he's safe before I leave, so that way we don't lose another one, if that makes sense. And then also just white people have power. Just use your privilege for good. You know what I'm saying? Like, use your privilege for good. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, also what I try to tell my black friends as well is we have to hold these people in office accountable. They smile in our faces to get our vote, and then when they get our vote, nothing changes. So if we all can come together as a people to get the right people in office, that's local and president, we'll be fine.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice, but also the idea of educating others.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the white community can educate their peers and hold people to account and open up doors and advocate for people to be on more representation on boards and boardrooms, you know, wherever it might be. One thing that's been really interesting is how much people are asking the Black community to educate others. And
Mm-hmm.
while that's important in some ways, actually, the incredible drain, as you've already mentioned, how draining this is, you know, to be asked all the time to teach someone about what they should or shouldn't say. It's definitely something that white allies can do to support, I think.
And then also on top of that, not only do we have to educate like white Americans, we have to educate ourselves, because there's a lot of people. At least I don't know how it is over there, but I know in the States there's a lot of our history that's not in the history books. Like, there's a lot of African Americans that didn't know what Juneteenth was, or they didn't know what the Black Wall Street massacre was. And so it's like we have to teach ourselves that, because the school districts are not going to teach that. So we have to teach ourselves that, teach our kids, and educate other people as well. And to Nathan's question, um what can we do to stimulate the movement across the other side of the pond? The only thing I can really say is just what you see happening in the States, just try to just keep pushing for change on the other side of the world. Just keep pushing for the protests, and that, in my opinion, that will help tremendously, because the more people we get, whether that's in the United States, whether that's overseas, the better the I would say the closer chance we get to actually making change.
Exactly. Also, something that I've realized as well is actually using your voice to advocate for
Mm-hmm.
others. So, as Nathan said, you know, if you maybe don't know about various businesses in your community who may happen to be Black, doing some research, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what there is out there, that can be really hard sometimes if you don't say have that information. But most cities, you know, have a sort of like in Newcastle, we have something called NIACA, which is the Northeast African uh, and Afro-Caribbean Community Association.
Okay.
So, for example, they have various businesses in there, creatives, musicians, and so you can, you know, in that instance, find out if, you know, there's maybe we've got an awesome takeaway that's Caribbean food, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that you can get delivered to your home, or you could buy fabric or whatever, you know, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you need. But yeah, it is about knowing that stuff, and I agree, it can be difficult to know that stuff, but also finding people and just like looking out there and seeing what, well, how can I support people around me? And this is something I'm really passionate about. So there's a lot of charities I could support, but the charities I support are always communities of color, because growing up in South Africa during
Mm-hmm.
apartheid, and coming, that came to an end as I was around 4 years old. Nelson Mandela was inaugurated, and it was
Mm-hmm.
time for this rainbow nation. And the first time that I really felt moved, and it's one of my strongest memories, was seeing people queue for about 8 hours to vote for the first time. Many
Mm-hmm.
people in all colors of the rainbow, like all sorts of different colors, but singing and dancing and holding hands, and it was beautiful. But at the same time, there's still so much to do in South Africa as well, you know, to kind of address so much inequality. We've had some more comments from Nathan. So um, oh yeah, so he's saying sound. I find it inspiring. There is a lot of young people over here backing the movement. So he's right. In the UK, we've had a lot of protests, and Nathan actually is a good friend of mine. He also lives in he also lives in Newcastle, where I am. So there have been a lot of protests here locally, and just a lot of people trying to amplify what's going on, and trying to support in ways that they can. So I guess it's exciting to know that there is this global conversation happening. But again,
Mhm.
as you've already mentioned, how draining, that there is all of this going on. And that's something I'd like to ask. So how do you keep yourself like okay at this time? So it's all of these feelings, all of this
Mhm.
energy, good and bad, but how do you like protect yourself? And I mean, you mentioned you're still going to work, 2 jobs, 5 days a week, you're doing your podcast, you're helping others do their podcasts. How do you keep yourself going? How do you energize yourself?
So podcasting, sleep when I can. I don't watch the news. I make sure to not watch the news. So like I get most of my news through Facebook. Like if something happens or Twitter, but I won't like watch the news to keep me sane. And then just on the weekends, I just podcast. Have conversations with my girlfriend just to kind of get my mind off of society and just to be in my own little bubble, even if it is for just maybe 2 days a week.
It's interesting that you say podcasting keeps you sane because I feel similarly.
Yes.
I'm a huge extrovert. I'm not able to see anyone at the moment. So these kind of conversations and also meeting people from different perspectives who can, just light up what I'm thinking. It's so nice to meet you actually, Taroy, because we have never met until just a couple of days ago. We started chatting. Speaking of podcasting, so we both teach people how to podcast, and help them in their kind of learning journey. So can you maybe for those listening who maybe would want to work with you, or even just, what's your process? How do you podcast, but also how can people start, and why is podcasting helpful? So we know that stories matter, but the
Uh-huh.
more stories that are told, different perspectives, the more we can all learn. So
Uh-huh.
how can people start podcasting, but also why do you think it's important? Why do you love it so much?
I love it because it's more of a venting mechanism to me, and also because a lot of people knew me for the sports aspect of Taroy. They didn't see the actual person that I was. So that's why I started it. How like as far as when it comes to me and my podcast business. So basically, I basically go around to like anybody. So if people hits me up and they want to start a podcast, I will go to like I have like my equipment, travel equipment. I go to their house, I set everything up. All they do is press record. All they do is talk, and I handle everything else. And then basically, if they want to get started, I have them on the platform Anchor. I normally try to. One of my clients just dropped last Sunday, and we did at least 4 to 5 episodes before they drop, so that way they have that content, because I always say that is important. So like it's best to have episodes already ready, so that way you're not stressing about, okay, I need this episode next. You already know, you already have a game plan of, okay, maybe I want to switch this one out for that one, or that one out for this one. And then like I said, I just edit it so that way it takes the pressure off of them. All they do is press record, I handle everything else, and it just makes it an easier experience for them. Okay, I know my engineer has my back on this, so I can come to him about, what do you think about this, and this? And I'll tell them if it's a good idea or not a good idea. And I always tell people up front, like, look, you have to be consistent. Podcasting, you have to be consistent, because the moment you stop for like a couple months with no notice, it's really hard to get those listeners back to engage with you, back to listen, because everything is basically off like a certain time slot. So my listeners know every Wednesday, 8 a.m., I'm dropping an episode. If I don't drop an episode, they're hitting me up saying, what happened to the episode?
You're so right about so many things there, but definitely consistency when you're podcasting or live streaming. I mean, it just keeps, if people know, like you go live at 7 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes
Mhm.
Sundays or whatever it might be, they kind of know to expect it. So yeah, they will. And it also allows them to miss you because they're like, where are you?
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
it's interesting what you do in terms of teaching people to podcast, because actually what you're doing is you're amplifying lots of voices, helping people to
Mhm.
get themselves heard. And that's one of the biggest fears with podcasting is like, how do I get my voice heard? What if I'm not good at the tech? So all of that stuff, you're actually solving a massive problem by just going,
Hmm.
hey, I'm here, let me record you. I love that. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, so that's what I normally do on the weekends. Like yesterday, I had two clients, and then I have one today later on to I have one today later on tonight, and then one of my newer clients, like she gets nervous when she's about to record, and I'm just like, yo, relax. You do this on Instagram all the time. It's just a conversation. Just relax, drink some liquor if you need to, do something, whatever you do to relax, just relax, and I'll take care of the rest. It's all that. That's why I try to tell people, all it is just a conversation. The only difference is now it's just going to be on multiple platforms where people can hear you. And I always try to tell people, if you have good content, people will listen. So just be yourself. Don't force it, don't rush it. The more natural you are, the more relatable you are, the more people will engage and gravitate towards you.
Yeah, you're right. It's something about just being yourself. Because actually, and this is true with a podcast, you can't, not everyone will like you. Not everyone
Mhm.
ever is going to like you anyway, right? But you'll find your tribe. And it's like the people who listen, sometimes you're surprised by, they're from all over. Gosh, I've
Yes.
been surprised. One of my top kind of listeners and really supportive listeners is a guy in Liechtenstein, which is like this tiny little place in, I think it's near Germany.
Mhm.
To be honest, I don't really know, but we actually had a catch up on LinkedIn from meeting on LinkedIn, and we had a Zoom call, and he was like, he listened to every episode, and he was so cool. So it's amazing who you might reach. You just never know.
Yes.
But yeah, I love your passion for podcasting, and it's nice to find fellow people who
Mhm.
just love something that I love so much. I think it's a great way to, as you say, um, share your thoughts. But what I
Mhm.
like to do as well, because mine is always with guests, is it's
Mhm.
so nice to kind of hear other perspectives and meet
Mhm.
people and that kind of thing. So I'm mindful of the time. There's two things I want to ask you. So you are obviously helping clients and you're doing your own
Mhm.
stuff. Is there a way that people can work with you or meet you online, or where do you like to hang out? Is there anything you'd like to share around how people can get in touch and work with you?
If y'all want to get in touch with me, my Instagram is going to be average JTPC. That's my podcast Instagram, and then my Instagram for my podcast business is the average Joe Media. I try to keep everything average Joe because I am the average Joe. You know.
Well, actually, now I have three questions. Well, two, because I'd already asked the first one. Um, why Average Joe, right? What's with that name? Can you tell?
So okay, so when I first started this back in February of last year, it was probably around like December when I was starting to come up with the name, and I was just like, at first I was like, thoughts of a nice guy. People was like, yeah, you're a nice guy, but because of your past, don't want to say that. So I was like, okay, well, I dress like an average guy. Like I'm always in sweatpants, always in t-shirts. Then I was like, okay, average Joe. Thoughts of an average Joe, because I'm giving you my thoughts, and I'm just the average guy. And then I just kept everything. I just kept that name and just ran with it.
It's awesome. Yeah, I like that. I just wanted to check, but yeah, for anyone who's watching, honestly, check out Taroy's podcast because I love it and I love the tune and the little jingle. It's so professional. It's really cool. Okay, so we're running out of time. There's one last question, my favorite. And what is your number one way to nurture your zest?
Sleep and stability.
I love that.
Sleep is very important to me, but also stability. The reason why I work so hard is because in my past I got into some situations to where now I want to be able to, as I'm getting older, I turned 31 in September. I want to be stable. So I want to work hard now. So by the time my mid 30s, I can be stable. I can have a family. I don't have to worry about, oh, okay, do I have money for this? Yes, I know I have money for this because I have a podcast business and I'm working two jobs. So I always feel like work hard, play later.
I love that. And you obviously are working so hard, and it's so nice to meet you. And it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. So,
Thank you.
we're going to say goodbye to you now. So, if it's okay, I'm going to remove you from the screen. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for watching tonight, and for anyone watching on replay. It was so nice to talk to Taroy, and just to meet someone from the States and across the pond. And I hope you've enjoyed tonight. And if you would like to go and check out our episodes on YouTube or or on the Nurture Your Zest website. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.